Stop forcing fiber into your system immediately. If you are over 50 and battling chronic constipation, eating bowls of raw vegetables and psyllium husk is exactly like pouring dry concrete down a completely blocked pipe. You are not resolving the obstruction, you are compacting it. You wake up every single morning with a heavy, distended abdomen, terrified of the physical pain waiting for you in the bathroom. But the discomfort is the least of your problems. The real crisis is unfolding at a microscopic level. That hardened mass of trapped waste, known clinically as fecal impaction, is not just sitting there. It is actively rotting and leaking lethal endotoxins directly into your bloodstream, systematically paralyzing the insulin receptors across your entire body. Today, MedScience Exposed is taking you inside the gastrointestinal tract to perform a clinical autopsy on the exact mechanisms destroying your bowel motility. We will dissect exactly why drinking gallons of water and chewing through endless salads are failing you. More importantly, we will reveal a highly specific medical-grade protocol. You will learn how to use a targeted kitchen oil, saturated with oleic acid, to forcefully stimulate your goblet cells, regenerate your mucin layer, and restart your paralyzed peristaltic contractions in under 12 hours. To understand the catastrophic failure of your bowel movements, we must analyze the cellular architecture of your intestinal barrier. After age 50, your colon does not just slow down. It experiences a structural drought. The millions of goblet cells lining your intestinal mucosa begin to atrophy. These specialized epithelial cells have one critical function. They synthesize and secrete mucin. Mucin is a heavily glycosylated protein that forms a thick, slippery mucosal gel over the intestinal wall. It is the biological equivalent of motor oil for your digestive engine. When goblet cell function declines, your mucin production plummets by over 35%. Your colon transforms from a perfectly lubricated conduit into a dry, highly abrasive, and hostile environment. This is the exact moment the high-fiber diet becomes a weapon against your own body. Soluble and insoluble fibers require a massive amount of fluid and a thick mucosal coating to glide through the digestive tract. When you force fiber into a mucin-depleted colon, it rapidly absorbs whatever residual moisture exists in the surrounding tissue and instantly solidifies. It does not form a healthy stool. It calcifies into a dense, cement-like biological plaque. This jagged mass embeds itself aggressively into the mucosal folds of your intestinal wall. Every additional fiber supplement you swallow simply adds another layer of mortar to this mechanical obstruction. The muscles of your colon strain against this immovable object until they eventually exhaust themselves and stop contracting entirely. But the mechanical blockage is only phase one of the destruction. As this biological plaque remains trapped in the 98-degree incubator of your colon, it begins to undergo rapid putrefaction. Fermenting bacteria multiply exponentially, feeding on the decaying mass and releasing highly toxic byproducts. These toxins act like chemical acid, physically degrading the tight junctions between your intestinal epithelial cells. This creates microscopic tears in your gut barrier. Highly inflammatory bacterial endotoxins, specifically lipopolysaccharides, breach the defensive perimeter and flood directly into your portal vein. Your colon is no longer a waste disposal unit. It has become a toxic reservoir, steadily pumping raw biological waste into your systemic circulation every second of the day. The mainstream dietary advice of eating low-fat and high-fiber is actively starving your body of the exact raw materials required to fix this crisis. When you eliminate high-quality lipids from your diet, you deprive your goblet cells of the primary building blocks needed to synthesize the lipid-heavy mucin glycoproteins. You are effectively demanding your body to produce lubrication while simultaneously cutting off the supply chain of oil. Furthermore, the decaying waste trapped behind the obstruction undergoes severe fermentation, generating massive volumes of hydrogen sulfide and methane gas. This toxic gas expands the colon outward, causing the painful bloating you feel. But more critically, it forces toxic pressure back up the portal vein, overwhelming your hepatic filtration system. Your liver becomes so bogged down trying to neutralize this constant influx of fecal toxins that it cannot properly process normal metabolic waste. You are suffocating your own internal organs because you refuse to address the mechanical drought inside your large intestine. This continuous leakage triggers a massive systemic inflammatory response that directly sabotages your cellular metabolism. The lipopolysaccharides traveling through your bloodstream bind to toll-like receptors on the surface of your cells. This binding action triggers an intracellular alarm system that physically alters the structure of your insulin receptors. Even if you consume a strict low-sugar diet, your cells become completely blind to the insulin your pancreas produces. Glucose becomes trapped in the bloodstream, unable to enter the cells for energy synthesis. Your chronic constipation has fundamentally mutated into cellular insulin resistance. The chronic fatigue, the sudden weight gain, and the constant brain fog you are experiencing are not signs of aging. They are the direct physical symptoms of your colon poisoning your metabolic engine from the inside out. To reverse this catastrophic metabolic collapse, you must immediately abandon stimulant laxatives. Over-the-counter laxatives containing senna or bisacodyl are neurotoxins for your gut. They do not fix the mucosal drought. They forcibly shock the enteric nervous system, violently whipping the exhausted intestinal muscles into spasms to expel the blockage. Every time you swallow a stimulant laxative, you permanently fry the delicate nerve endings embedded in your colon wall. Over time, your colon becomes completely paralyzed, incapable of contracting without chemical stimulation. This is not a cure. It is a slow, self-inflicted paralysis. You must stop shocking the system and start rebuilding the biological machinery. The protocol for restoring bowel motility requires a targeted physical intervention. You must introduce a high-grade lipid solvent directly into the gastrointestinal tract to force the goblet cells back into production and chemically detach the biological plaque from the intestinal walls. The most potent tool for this clinical restoration is high polyphenol, cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil. Olive oil is not just a cooking ingredient. It is an extremely concentrated source of oleic acid, a monounsaturated omega-9 fatty acid. Unlike most dietary fats that are completely emulsified and absorbed in the upper digestive tract, a specific clinical dose of oleic acid survives the journey through the stomach and small intestine, arriving intact at the epithelial lining of the colon. When high concentrations of oleic acid coat the colon wall, they act as a potent biological signaling molecule. They forcibly bind to the surface receptors of dormant goblet cells, upregulating their genetic expression and demanding the immediate synthesis and release of fresh mucin. You are effectively injecting a pharmaceutical-grade lubricant directly onto the damaged mucosa. But lubrication alone is not enough to move a calcified mass. We must simultaneously restart the paralyzed mechanical engine. To do this, the oleic acid protocol must be catalyzed with two specific biochemical activators. First, the introduction of citric acid from freshly squeezed lemon juice. The moment concentrated citric acid hits the stomach lining, it triggers a rapid neurological reflex that contracts the gallbladder. The gallbladder violently expels a highly concentrated surge of bile acids directly into the duodenum. Bile is the body's endogenous chemical solvent. When this surge of bile mixes with the oleic acid moving down the digestive tract, it creates a hyper-lubricating emulsion that acts like a biological crowbar, slipping behind the hardened fecal plaque and aggressively detaching it from the mucosal folds. Second, the protocol requires the precise application of gingerols, the highly bioactive phenolic compounds found in raw ginger. Gingerols are powerful prokinetic agents. They do not cause violent spasms like chemical laxatives. Instead, they directly bind to the serotonin receptors located within the enteric nervous system of the gut. This specific binding action rapidly depolarizes the smooth muscle cells of the intestinal wall, instantly reigniting the natural, rhythmic, wave-like contractions known as peristalsis. The gingerols act as the starter motor, forcing the paralyzed colon back to life. The precision of this protocol is non-negotiable. You cannot simply pour olive oil over a salad and expect a clinical outcome. The gastrointestinal tract must be completely empty to ensure maximum contact between the oleic acid and the damaged mucosal lining. Every morning, immediately upon waking, before any solid food enters your system, you must consume exactly 1 tablespoon of high polyphenol, extra virgin olive oil, combined with the freshly squeezed juice of half a lemon and 1/4 teaspoon of finely grated raw ginger. Swallow this emulsion immediately. Do not consume any food or other liquids for exactly 30 minutes. This precise fasting window allows the oleic acid emulsion to coat the stomach, trigger the gallbladder contraction, activate the enteric nervous system, and sweep down into the colon without any interference from digestive enzymes trying to break down breakfast. Within 12 to 24 hours of the first dose, the localized inflammation begins to subside. The mucosal layer thickens. The biological plaque begins to soften and detach. By day 3, the peristaltic contractions will become pronounced and coordinated. The heavy, stagnant pressure in your lower abdomen will break. The metabolic crisis will halt. You are standing at a critical biological crossroad. You can choose to continue chewing on dry fiber, swallowing more water, and slowly paralyzing your colon with stimulant laxatives while the toxic sludge seeps into your bloodstream and shuts down your cellular metabolism. Or you can take control of your biology. You can use the precise biochemical mechanics of oleic acid, citric acid, and gingerols to aggressively rebuild your mucosal barrier, restart your enteric nervous system, and flush the rotting plaque from your body. The spoon is in your hand. The choice between metabolic paralysis and complete digestive restoration is entirely up to you. Do not let your body rot from the inside out. Subscribe to Med Science Exposed right now to uncover the unvarnished clinical truths about human physiology, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a protocol that could save your life. Leave a comment below with your exact symptoms and how long you have been suffering from this mechanical failure. We will see you in the autopsy room next time. Stop forcing fiber into your system immediately. If you are over the age of 50 and battling chronic constipation, eating massive bowls of raw cruciferous vegetables, swallowing handfuls of psyllium husk capsules, and forcing down dry bran cereals is exactly like pouring dry concrete down a completely blocked plumbing pipe. You are not resolving the mechanical obstruction. You are actively, physically compacting it. You wake up every single morning with a heavy, painfully distended abdomen, terrified of the physical agony waiting for you in the bathroom. But the localized abdominal discomfort is the absolute least of your problems. The real life-threatening crisis is unfolding at a microscopic, biochemical level right now. That hardened, immovable mass of trapped biological waste, known clinically in gastroenterology as a fecal impaction, is not just sitting passively inside your large intestine. It is actively rotting. It is putrefying at an internal body temperature of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is leaking highly lethal bacterial endotoxins directly into your systemic bloodstream, systematically paralyzing the insulin receptors across your entire body. Today, Med Science Exposed is taking you deep inside the gastrointestinal tract to perform a cold, calculated clinical autopsy on the exact mechanisms that are currently destroying your bowel motility. We will dissect exactly why drinking gallons of water and chewing through endless salads are catastrophically failing you. More importantly, we will reveal a highly specific medical-grade nutritional protocol. You will learn exactly how to use a targeted kitchen oil saturated with an ultra-high concentration of oleic acid to forcefully stimulate your dormant goblet cells, rapidly regenerate your critical mucin layer, and restart your paralyzed peristaltic contractions in under 12 hours. To truly understand the catastrophic systemic failure of your bowel movements, we must first put your intestinal barrier under the microscope and analyze its cellular architecture. After you pass the age of 50, your colon does not just mysteriously slow down due to aging. It experiences a severe structural biological drought. The millions of specialized epithelial cells lining your intestinal mucosa, specifically the goblet cells, begin to rapidly atrophy. These goblet cells have one critical, non-negotiable physiological function. They synthesize and secrete mucin. Mucin is a heavily glycosylated protein matrix that forms a thick, slippery, protective mucosal gel over the entire surface of the intestinal wall. It is the biological equivalent of synthetic motor oil for your digestive engine. When goblet cell cellular function declines due to years of poor dietary habits and metabolic wear and tear, your internal mucin production plummets by over 35%. Your colon physically transforms from a perfectly lubricated, slick conduit into a dry, highly abrasive, an incredibly hostile biological environment. This is the exact precise moment the heavily promoted high-fiber diet becomes a deadly weapon against your own body. Let us break down the physical mechanics of fiber. Both soluble and insoluble dietary fibers require a massive amount of surrounding fluid and a thick, robust mucosal coating to successfully glide through the twists and turns of the digestive tract. When you aggressively force fiber into a mucin-depleted, chronically dehydrated colon, it acts like a biological sponge. It rapidly absorbs whatever tiny amount of residual moisture still exists in the surrounding mucosal tissue, and then it instantly solidifies. It does not form a healthy, easily passable stool. It calcifies into a dense, cement-like biological plaque. This jagged, abrasive mass embeds itself aggressively into the delicate mucosal folds of your intestinal wall. Every single additional fiber supplement you blindly swallow simply adds another thick layer of mortar to this mechanical obstruction. The smooth muscles of your colon forcefully strain against this immovable, petrified object until they eventually exhaust their cellular ATP reserves and stop contracting entirely. You have now achieved complete colonic paralysis, but the mechanical blockage is only phase one of the physiological destruction. As this biological plaque remains trapped in the dark, warm incubator of your colon, it begins to undergo a process of rapid, toxic putrefaction. Opportunistic, fermenting bacterial strains multiply exponentially. They feed voraciously on the decaying organic mass, releasing highly toxic, gaseous byproducts. These toxins act like a corrosive chemical acid, physically degrading the tight junctions, the microscopic protein bridges, that hold your intestinal epithelial cells together. This degradation creates microscopic, gaping tears in your critical gut barrier. Highly inflammatory bacterial endotoxins, specifically lipopolysaccharides or LPS, breach the defensive perimeter of the gut lining and flood directly into your portal vein. Your colon is no longer functioning as a waste disposal unit. It has structurally mutated into a toxic internal reservoir, steadily pumping raw, untreated biological waste into your systemic circulation every single second of the day. The mainstream outdated dietary advice of eating a low-fat, high-fiber diet is actively starving your cellular machinery of the exact raw materials required to fix this escalating crisis. When you deliberately eliminate high-quality lipids from your daily nutritional intake, you completely deprive your goblet cells of the primary molecular building blocks needed to synthesize those vital, lipid-heavy mucin glycoproteins. You are effectively demanding your body to produce high-grade biological lubrication while simultaneously cutting off the entire supply chain of oil. It is a biological impossibility. Furthermore, the decaying organic waste trapped behind this mechanical obstruction undergoes continuous, severe anaerobic fermentation. This is not a benign process. The specialized bacterial colonies trapped in this isolated environment generate massive, concentrated volumes of highly toxic gases, primarily hydrogen sulfide and methane. These are not merely uncomfortable byproducts, they are highly bioactive molecular compounds. This toxic gas rapidly expands the colonic walls outward, causing the excruciating, tight abdominal bloating you feel every evening. But far more critically, this trapped gaseous expansion forces extreme hydrostatic and toxic pressure backward through the hepatic portal vein. This localized colonic pressure effectively backs up your entire hepatic filtration system. The Kupffer cells within your liver, your primary defensive macrophages, become completely saturated and overwhelmed by the sheer volume of incoming endotoxins. Your liver becomes so bogged down frantically trying to neutralize this constant, heavy influx of fecal toxicity that it simply cannot properly process your normal, daily metabolic waste. You are quite literally suffocating your own internal organs because you refuse to address the severe mechanical and fluid drought isolated inside your large intestine. This continuous, unabated leakage of lipopolysaccharides into your bloodstream triggers a massive systemic inflammatory response that directly and aggressively sabotages your cellular metabolism. When these circulating endotoxins encounter the cells of your muscle and adipose tissue, they physically bind to specific surface proteins known as toll-like receptor 4 or TLR4. This binding action acts as an epigenetic trigger, initiating an aggressive intracellular alarm cascade, specifically the NF-kappa B inflammatory pathway. The resulting explosion of inflammatory cytokines, like TNF-alpha and interleukin-6, physically interferes with the internal signaling mechanisms of your insulin receptors. Specifically, they disrupt the tyrosine phosphorylation of insulin receptor substrate 1, causing serine phosphorylation instead. In clinical terms, this means the biological lock is jammed. Even if you consume a strict zero-carbohydrate diet, your cellular receptors become completely blind and deaf to the insulin your pancreas is desperately producing. Glucose remains trapped circulating in the bloodstream, entirely unable to enter the mitochondria for ATP energy synthesis. Your localized chronic constipation has now fundamentally mutated into systemic cellular insulin resistance. The profound crushing chronic fatigue, the sudden unexplainable abdominal weight gain, and the constant debilitating brain fog you are experiencing are absolutely not normal signs of aging. They are not hormonal imbalances. They are the direct, measurable physical symptoms of your paralyzed colon, poisoning your metabolic engine from the inside out. To reverse this catastrophic metabolic collapse, you must immediately and permanently abandon the use of all stimulant laxatives. Over-the-counter pharmaceutical laxatives containing senna, bisacodyl, or cascara sagrada are functional neurotoxins for your gastrointestinal tract. They do not fix the underlying mucosal drought. They do not rebuild the barrier. Instead, they forcibly and violently shock the enteric nervous system, whipping the already exhausted intestinal smooth muscle into artificial spastic convulsions just to expel the immediate blockage. Every single time you swallow a chemical stimulant laxative, you are systematically frying the delicate interstitial cells of Kajal, the electrical pacemaker cells embedded deep within your colon wall. Over time, through repeated exposure to these chemicals, your colon becomes completely flaccid and paralyzed, physiologically incapable of initiating a contraction without highly concentrated chemical stimulation. This is not a medical cure. It is a slow, self-inflicted biological paralysis. You must immediately stop shocking the electrical system and start aggressively rebuilding the biological machinery. The clinical protocol for restoring autonomous bowel motility requires a targeted, precise biophysical intervention. You must introduce a high-grade, unrefined lipid solvent directly into the gastrointestinal tract to forcefully command the goblet cells back into active mucin production and chemically detach the calcified biological plaque from the intestinal walls. The absolute most potent, scientifically validated tool for this clinical restoration is ultra-high polyphenol, cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil. Olive oil is not just a culinary cooking ingredient. In its pure, unadulterated form, it is an extremely concentrated, medical-grade source of oleic acid, a powerful monounsaturated omega-9 fatty acid. Unlike most dietary saturated and polyunsaturated fats that are completely emulsified by bile and fully absorbed high up in the small intestine, a specific concentrated clinical bolus of raw oleic acid can survive the journey through the stomach and duodenum, arriving physically intact at the epithelial lining of the descending colon. When hyperconcentrated levels of intact oleic acid successfully coat the dry colonic wall, they act as an overwhelming biological signaling molecule. The oleic acid physically binds to the lipid-sensing surface receptors of the dormant goblet cells. This binding initiates a rapid epigenetic upregulation of the MUC2 gene, demanding the immediate emergency synthesis and exocytosis of fresh, highly hydrated mucin. You are effectively injecting a pharmaceutical-grade, biological lubricant directly onto the damaged abrasive mucosa. But localized lubrication alone is simply not enough to physically move a deeply embedded, calcified mass of waste. We must simultaneously restart the paralyzed mechanical engine of the gut. To do this, the pure oleic acid protocol must be aggressively catalyzed with two highly specific biochemical activators. The first activator is the introduction of pure, unpasteurized citric acid, derived from freshly squeezed lemon juice. The exact moment concentrated raw citric acid makes physical contact with the mucosal lining of the stomach and duodenum, it triggers a rapid, involuntary neuroendocrine reflex, It chemically stimulates the enteroendocrine eye cells to release a massive immediate surge of the peptide hormone cholecystokinin, or CCK. The sudden spike in circulating CCK binds directly to the specific receptors located on the gallbladder wall, commanding the gallbladder organ to violently and rapidly contract. This contraction forcefully expels a highly concentrated, viscous surge of primary and secondary bile acids directly into the upper gastrointestinal tract. Bile is the human body's endogenous, highly alkaline chemical solvent. It acts as a powerful biological surfactant. When this sudden, heavy surge of bile acids physically collides and mixes with the dense bolus of oleic acid rapidly moving down the digestive tract, it creates a unique, hyperlubricating micellar emulsion. This specific bile lipid emulsion acts quite literally like a biological crowbar. It forcefully slips behind the hardened, calcified fecal plaque, aggressively breaking the surface tension and chemically detaching the stubborn obstruction from the deep mucosal folds of the intestinal wall, all without causing any mechanical trauma or micro-tearing to the underlying vulnerable tissue. The second mandatory activator in this protocol requires the precise clinical application of gingerols, the highly bioactive, volatile phenolic compounds found exclusively in raw, unheated ginger root. You are absolutely not using ginger for its flavor profile or culinary warmth. You are utilizing concentrated gingerols as a highly potent, targeted prokinetic pharmaceutical agent. Unlike toxic, over-the-counter chemical laxatives that induce random, violent, and highly destructive spasms of the intestinal wall, gingerols operate with absolute surgical biochemical precision. They bypass the central nervous system entirely and bind directly to the 5-hydroxytryptamine 4, or 5-HT4, serotonin receptors located deep within the enteric nervous system of the gut. This specific targeted receptor binding action rapidly depolarizes the resting membrane potential of the intestinal smooth muscle cells. This targeted cellular depolarization instantly reignites the migrating motor complex, or MMC. The MMC is the sweeping, rhythmic, highly coordinated, wave-like muscular contraction, true biological peristalsis, that naturally propels biological matter forward through the tract. The gingerols act as the precise electrical starter motor, forcing the paralyzed, flaccid colonic muscle tissue to methodically grind back to life, pushing the newly lubricated detached waste mass smoothly and predictably toward the rectum for final expulsion. The precision and execution of this biophysical protocol are absolutely non-negotiable. You cannot simply casually pour olive oil over a heavy, mixed macronutrient dinner salad and expect a clinical, therapeutic outcome. The entire gastrointestinal tract must be entirely empty to ensure rapid gastric emptying and to guarantee maximum physical contact between the oleic acid emulsion and the damaged colonic mucosal lining. If any solid food is present in the stomach, the medicinal oil will become trapped within the complex food matrix, where it will be completely, systematically broken down and metabolized by pancreatic lipases and bile salts long before it ever reaches the descending colon, where the actual obstruction resides. Therefore, every single morning, immediately upon waking, before a single drop of coffee, tea, or morsel of solid food enters your biological system, you must consume this exact measured formulation. Exactly 1 standardized tablespoon of ultra-high polyphenol, cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil, vigorously mixed with the freshly squeezed juice of exactly 1/2 of a raw lemon, and 1/4 teaspoon of finely grated raw ginger root. You must swallow this emulsion immediately upon mixing to prevent the rapid oxidation of the delicate volatile compounds in the oil and the ginger. Crucially, you must absolutely not consume any food, dietary supplements, medications, or other liquids for exactly 30 to 45 minutes post-ingestion. This precise, non-negotiable fasting window is the absolute biological requirement that allows the oleic acid emulsion to rapidly coat the stomach lining, trigger the massive CCK-induced gallbladder contraction, activate the 5-HT4 receptors of the enteric nervous system, and sweep violently and efficiently down into the large intestine without any biochemical interference from normal digestive enzymes attempting to break down a breakfast meal. When executed with strict daily adherence, The timeline of clinical recovery is highly predictable and scientifically observable. Within the first 12 to 24 hours of the initial dose, the localized colonic tissue inflammation begins to measurably subside. The mucosal goblet cells are aggressively activated by the oleic acid, and the completely dehydrated mucin layer begins to rapidly rehydrate, expand, and thicken. The embedded, jagged biological plaque starts to chemically soften and lose its abrasive structural integrity. By day 3 of consistent timed application, the gingerol-induced peristaltic contractions will become physically pronounced, rhythmic, and highly coordinated. The heavy, stagnant, highly toxic pressure trapped in your lower abdominal quadrant will definitively break. Once the calcified mass is physically expelled from the body, the microscopic tears in the intestinal tight junctions begin to rapidly seal themselves. The catastrophic flood of lipopolysaccharides entering the portal vein abruptly stops. The Kupffer cells in your liver are suddenly relieved of their massive, overwhelming toxic burden, allowing hepatic function to immediately pivot back to normal lipid and glucose metabolism. Your cellular insulin receptors, no longer continuously bombarded by inflammatory cytokines, regain their baseline molecular sensitivity. This is exactly how fixing a localized mechanical obstruction in your gut directly and rapidly reverses systemic metabolic dysfunction, crushing chronic fatigue, and severe cellular insulin resistance. You are currently standing at a highly critical, irreversible biological crossroad. Your gastrointestinal system has reached its absolute, finite limit of physiological tolerance. Every single day you delay this precise biophysical intervention. Every day you choose to blindly swallow another handful of inert, dehydrating fiber capsules, or drink another glass of toxic, nerve-damaging, chemical stimulant laxatives. You are making a conscious, deliberate decision to accelerate the structural necrosis of your own colon. You are actively choosing to let those highly pathogenic lipopolysaccharides continue their relentless, daily assault on your hepatic filtration system, your cardiovascular endothelium, and your cellular insulin receptors. You are actively choosing the crushing systemic fatigue. You are actively choosing the accelerating metabolic paralysis. This is the unvarnished, brutal clinical reality of gastrointestinal mechanics that the mainstream nutritional guidelines completely and utterly refuse to acknowledge. The human colon was never biologically designed, nor is it structurally equipped, to act as a stagnant, dehydrated anaerobic fermentation vat for massive volumes of raw, indigestible plant cellulose. It is, by its very evolutionary design, a highly dynamic, heavily lubricated neuromuscular propulsion engine. An engine that absolutely requires specific, high-grade lipid substrates to maintain its structural integrity, its mucosal defense barrier, and its functional motility. If you continue to deny this biological engine the oleic acid it fundamentally requires, the end stage of this pathology is not merely chronic daily discomfort. The end stage is a severe clinical emergency known as an acute bowel obstruction, often requiring immediate, highly invasive surgical intervention. We are talking about an emergency laparotomy, a partial or total colectomy, where a surgeon must physically cut open your abdominal cavity and literally slice out the necrotic, paralyzed, impacted sections of your large intestine, leaving you permanently reliant on a synthetic colostomy bag to process your bodily waste for the remainder of your natural life. When the bowel wall becomes fully necrotic due to a complete lack of blood flow caused by the sheer physical pressure of the calcified fecal rock, sepsis is the next immediate stage. The mortality rate of severe fecal impaction leading to colonic perforation and systemic sepsis is statistically staggering, particularly in the demographic over 50 years of age. You are playing Russian roulette with your gastrointestinal tract every single day. You ignore the structural, fundamental need for lipid-based mucin regeneration. The decision between continued progressive metabolic paralysis, the highly probable risk of future surgical resection, and complete autonomous digestive restoration now rests entirely in your hands. This specific clinical outcome is dictated exclusively by the literal, physical choices you make at your kitchen counter tomorrow morning. You can absolutely choose to continue to blindly follow the catastrophically flawed, low-fat, high-fiber dogma that originally put you in this exact state of severe physiological decay. You can continue to chew on dry, abrasive roughage like a grazing ruminant animal, hopelessly watching your abdomen painfully distend and harden, while the systemic endotoxemia silently and progressively destroys your underlying metabolic health and cellular energy production. Or you can choose to immediately pivot to targeted clinical biophysics. You can choose to leverage the precise, scientifically undeniable biochemical mechanics of extra virgin oleic acid, pure, unpasteurized citric acid, and raw, potent gingerols to aggressively and systematically rebuild your destroyed mucosal barrier. You can utilize this specific, highly concentrated lipid emulsion to forcefully restart your paralyzed enteric nervous system, physically regenerate your critical goblet cells, and permanently flush the rotting, calcified biological plaque from your body. The protocol is precise. The biophysics are mathematically exact. The clinical results are biologically predictable. The measuring spoon is currently resting on your kitchen counter. The raw biological materials required for absolute systemic restoration are sitting right there in your pantry, waiting to be catalyzed. The choice between living out your remaining decades with a paralyzed, highly toxic bowel or operating a perfectly synchronized, highly efficient metabolic engine is entirely up to you. Do not let your physical body continue to rot and degrade from the inside out, simply because you lack the discipline to execute a targeted biophysical intervention. It is time to execute the protocol. Subscribe to me right now to continuously uncover the unvarnished, mathematically precise, clinical truths about human physiology. Hit the notification bell immediately so you never miss a targeted, evidence-based medical protocol that could literally save your cellular life and prevent a surgical catastrophe. Leave a detailed, clinical comment below documenting your exact gastrointestinal symptoms, the specific duration of your mechanical failure, and the exact date you are commencing the oleic acid protocol. We demand rigorous data from our viewers. We will review your specific case files in the autopsy room next time.